Alright, welcome to the first video for Unit 2. So Unit 2 is Biological Bases of Behavior. Right, now again, the idea here is what we're going to be looking at is biology and really setting kind of, as it says, kind of the building blocks for all of behavior. Right, at the end of the day, everything behavioral is biological. Right, everything we do goes back to biology. So we're going to start kind of talking about that and looking at it through a whole bunch of different pieces here. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is just the nervous system in general, right? We'll get more and more specific kind of as we go, but we're going to be starting with just kind of the nervous system as a whole. So the first kind of thing is just what is the nervous system? What does that mean? What are we talking about, right? So basically what the nervous system is a system of information transmission, right? And it has kind of two big jobs, I guess maybe three big jobs, right? The first thing is pulling information from the outside world and pulling it into our minds, basically, right? Into our brain. So we collect information through our eyes, our ears, through sensors in our skin, through our sense of taste, right? All of these different senses that we have is collecting information all the time. So we have to take that information, right? We pull it from the outside world, and then it has to be transmitted, it has to be sent to our central nervous system, which is our brain for the most part, right? It's the most important piece. Our brain then makes decisions, right? And then it has to send that information back out to the body to tell it what to do, right? So that can be specific thing or like conscious things like movement, like walking and talking, right? It can be unconscious things, right? So like digesting or breathing or heart beating, right? All of that information is basically going to and fro. So there's this giant, basically network of information being sent all over our bodies, right? Now, our nervous system is made up of pretty much all neurons. There are other types of cells there, but neurons are really the biggest part and the one that we're really going to focus on the most. And these neurons, again, are going to be communicating with what we call neurotransmitters. And we'll break down neurons and neurotransmitters more. Well, those are kind of the building blocks, right? These neurons and these neurotransmitters that are going to be sending information all over our bodies. So this is basically just a nice little chart that's going to break down our nervous system into kind of the way we would categorize it, right? These kind of chunks that we categorize it into, okay? And I really, really suggest that you write this down exactly as is. You can obviously like add little pieces to it if you want, and we'll talk more and more about each part to kind of give you a little bit better idea of what each one's doing. But this is kind of how we would categorize or break it down, right? So again, we have our nervous system as a whole, right? But we can break our nervous system down into our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system. Now we're going to talk about each of these specifically in just a moment, but basically our central nervous system is our brain and our spinal cord, as you can see here. Our peripheral nervous system is basically these nerves that are going all over the rest of our body. Okay, and they have kind of two separate jobs, but like I said, we'll talk about that in just a moment. We can also break down our peripheral nervous system, right, into the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. Okay, now our autonomic nervous system is about communicating with our internal organs and our glands, right? Now, I always said like autonomic is automatic, right? This is the stuff that our body just does on its own. We don't even really think about doing it. It does it, right? So digestion is a good example, right? You don't like eat something and then have to consciously go, okay, I'm going to start digesting now, right? Your body just does it on its own. Same thing with like increasing your heart rate, or if you get like scared or something, right? You don't have to like consciously think to make your heart beat faster, right? It starts beating faster on its own. You start breathing harder, right? You might start sweating a little bit, right? All of that stuff is automatic. So autonomic is kind of these automatic things. So it's going to be communicating with our internal organs and our glands. The somatic nervous system, right, is going to be communicating with our sensory organs and our voluntary muscles, right? So somatic nervous system is about obviously our senses, right? Hearing and seeing and smelling and tasting and touching, right? And also then our voluntary muscle movements. So when I go to walk, right, you consciously think about walking. Right, you have to make a decision to walk. You don't just do it on your own, right? So that's our somatic nervous system. Now we can also break down these into two groups as well. Our autonomic nervous system can be broken down into the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division. Now, the sympathetic division is basically the arousal side, and the parasympathetic is the calming side. So if we use that example of like being afraid of something, right? When you first get scared, you're going to experience arousal, right? Your heart's going to start beating faster, you're going to start breathing faster, right? Your muscles might tense, right? You go through all those things that come with fear. So that's the sympathetic side. Our parasympathetic side is going to do the opposite, right? So once we are afraid, eventually we're going to calm down, right? So that's what this side is doing. It's calming us. Our somatic nervous system can also be broken down into two sides, the afferent and the efferent, right? So we can also refer to those as the sensory nervous system and the motor nervous system, right? Now those names are pretty easy to think of usually, right? Sensory is obviously going to have to do with sensory input, so information coming into our bodies, and motor nervous system is going to have to do with movement, right? Motor, so that's the information being sent from our brains generally, right? From our central nervous system to our muscles, right? That kind of output. And again, we'll talk about all of these kind of pieces a little more in depth later on in this unit as well. All right, so just to kind of give a little more detail on the central nervous system, right? The central nervous system is made up of our brain and our spinal cord, as I mentioned before. And really, its job is pretty simple. It is going to make decisions, right? It's our decision maker. So it is what decides, where to go, how to talk, what to eat, right? All those things we make, all those decisions we make, even the really small ones, are handled by that central nervous system. On the other hand, we have our peripheral nervous system, right? Now, our peripheral nervous system is responsible for basically the transmission of information all over, right? So it has kind of two big jobs. One of them is gathering information, right? So it's going to connect to all those sensory organs and pull that information into our bodies and then into our central nervous system. And then in addition, it has the job of carrying the information from our central nervous system out to all the rest of the parts of our body and telling them what to do, right? So I always think of kind of the peripheral nervous system as kind of like electrical cables that go all over our body, right? And they actually have kind of some similarities in even how they're put together. So if we look at this little diagram over here, this is basically the build or the what a nerve looks like, right? If we cut it open and magnified it, obviously a ton. So nerves are basically what make up the majority of the peripheral nervous system. And what nerves are is basically just a bunch of neurons, right? This is a neuron right here, all wrapped together, right? So if you've ever cut like a cable cord or an electrical cord open, right? It's a whole bunch of little wires that are wrapped around each other, right? And then they're wrapped around, usually in some sort of casing. And then sometimes if you have like a really big cord, there'll be like multiple wires wrapped around other multiple wires, right? That's kind of how the peripheral, or how our nerves work, right? We've got these really tiny neurons, and then we've got thousands and thousands of them all bundled together, right? And then we have these kind of like these wires, right? These nerves that run around our body, and again, they're transmitting information back and forth to wherever it needs to go, okay? So this is kind of something that you'll see pop up throughout this unit. I have it posted in Canvas already. But basically there's a anatomy coloring book that we would usually use if we were in class, but it's basically a way for us to kind of label and look at, and also sometimes it's just nice to color something, right? All of these different parts, and this biology unit is very heavily focused on you knowing the parts of the nervous system, the parts of the brain, where they are and what they do, right? So I really suggest you use it. You can print it out literally right from there. There's a whole bunch of pages. And then whenever you see these, you can kind of like pause the video and fill in the parts that we went over, okay? Obviously, you can do that at the end too, but it'll just kind of give you a break if you'd like as well. All right, so we're going to actually pause right here, and then our next video will be this video on neurons, right? And looking at these building blocks, right?